Before the ships came, there was home. In the year 1803, deep in Igbo Land, in the place we now call southeastern Nigeria, life was moving the way life should move. The yam farms were green. The markets were loud with laughter and trading. Children chased each other between the compounds, and the elders sat in the shade, settling matters the way elders do. There was a young hunter there. He had strong legs, quick eyes. There was a mother too, with a small child tied to her back, going to the stream in the morning lights. And there was also a chief, an old man with white in his hair and fire in his chest, a man whose word carried weight. Did not know each other yet, all of them, but the world was about to gather them into one terrible story, because far away, across the big water, men had decided that human beings could be bought and sold like yams in the markets.
Secure the boats. We go ashore at dawn.
They came without warning. Raiders, men who sold their own brothers for profits. They came with ropes and guns, and they took people the way a storm takes a roof, suddenly and without mercy. The hunter was taken on his way back from the bush. The mother was taken with her child still crying on her back. They took even the old chief with the grey hair and all. They marched them for days, long lines of people tied together, walking away from everything they had ever known, away from their farms, away from their ancestors' graves, down to the coast, where the big water begins and the ships were waiting. And there, at the edge of the sea, they were locked inside holding cells, packed together in the dark, waiting to be sold. No one came to save them, and the ship swallowed them, and it turned toward America. They called it the Middle Passage. For weeks, they lay in the belly of that ship, chained side by side in the darkness. The only light was a thin line coming through the boat above. The only sound was the sea, and the crying, and sometimes very softly somebody praying to Chukwu, the great God, asking why. The hunter held on. The mother held her child. The old chief closed his eyes and kept his spirit inside himself, like a man guiding a small flame in the wind. About 75 of them survived that crossing. 75 souls from Igbo Land. And when the ship finally stopped, they were not home. They were in a place called Savannah, Georgia. In Savannah, they were brought out into the light and sold.
Rings up forward about
$100, That was the price they put on a human being. $100 for the hunter, $100 for the mother and her child, $100 for the old chief. The buyers were agents working for two rich planters, John Cooper and Thomas Pardine.
She seems
These men
healthy and strong.
owned big plantations on an island nearby called St. Simon's Island,
Let's see what is
and
under
they
this
needed
cap.
strong hands to work their land. So, the deal was done. Money changed hands, papers were signed, and the 75 were chained again and loaded onto a smaller boat, a schooner called the York, for one last journey down the coast to the island where they were meant to live and die as slaves. But the Igbo had other plans. Down in the belly of that small boat, in the darkness, something began to move. Not a thing you could see, a thing you could feel. The old chief began to speak, softly, softly, in the Igbo tongue that their captors could not understand. He reminded them of who they were. He reminded them that their people do not kneel, that it is better to stand once as a free man than to crawl for 100 years as a slave. The words moved from mouth to hair, from hair to mouth, down the line of chained people. The hunter heard it, and his hands became fists. The mother heard it, and she held her child tighter and nodded in the dark. By the time that boat entered the quiet waters of Dunbar Creek, the 75 were no longer prisoners waiting for their fates. They were one body, one heart, waiting for one signal. And then it happened. Nobody knows the exact moment it happened, but we know how it ended. The Igbo rose, all of them, together like one wave. Chained hands became weapons. The men who had bought and beaten them suddenly found themselves fighting for their own lives on their own boats. 3 of the captors were thrown into the water. The sea they had used to carry stony people, that same sea took them and they drowned. The boat ran aground in the mud of Dunbar Creek, tilted and broken, finished. And for the first time since the raiders came, since the long march, since the dark belly of the ship, the Igbo stood free. Free, but standing on the wrong side of the world, standing in the marsh. The money mist around their legs and chains still on their wrists. But what could they do? Home was across an ocean no man could swim, and on this land, there was nothing waiting for them but the whip and the chain. More captors would come, they knew it. So, the old chief looked at his people, and he looked at the water, and he said, "The water brought us here. The water can take us home." One voice began to sing, then another, then all of them, singing together in Igbo. The water spirit brought us here. The water spirit will take us home. And then, my friend, they walked, led by their chief, 9 by 9, still chained together. They marched into the waters of Dunbar Creek, not running, not afraid, but singing. The water touched their feet, but they kept walking. It reached their waists. They kept singing. The old ones, the young ones, the mother with her child, step by step, deeper and deeper, their voices never breaking. They chose the water over the whip. They chose to live this world as free people, rather than live in it as property. When the white men found their bodies later, they wrote it down as drowning. 13 bodies were counted. That is what their papers say. But that is not what our people say. Our people say that when the water closed over them, they did not sink. They say a great flock of birds rose up out of the water, cycled once over that cursed island, and flew east over the ocean back home. The flying Africans. That is what the story became. Today, that place is called Igbo Landing. 13 were buried. Some, they say, were caught again. Some may have escaped into the land. The full number that the water took, nobody knows because the water keeps its own records. But the story refused to die. The people of that coast, the Gullah Geechee, the children of the enslaved, kept it alive. They told it by the firesides, just like this one, for 200 years. They put it in songs, they put it in books, and in 2022, they finally put up a marker at that site, so the whole world would now know what happened there. And every year, in the month of May, people gather at Dunbar Creek. They pour libation, they sing, and they remember. So, when you feel small, my friend, when the world tells you that you have no choice, remember the 75. Remember that even in chains, they choose. The water spirit brought them there, and the water spirit took them home.